The first panel will be culture and events. Sorry, I have too many pages open. All right, so the first panel is culture and events. If you have any questions for us, please put them into the little Q&A icon thingy there so we can make sure that we get them and ask them. In this panel, we will have Don't Miss This, which is hosted by me, Navigating the French, which is hosted by Emily Monaco, Paris Cachée, hosted by Lily Heise. I'm going to quickly show you our show trailers, and then we'll start with the questions moderated by Gail. Let's see if this works.
We've all seen the Eiffel Tower, queued at the Louvre, and picnicked on the steps of Sacré-Cœur. But a treasure hunt through the Marais, drag queen bingo in Belleville, graffiti art installations in abandoned warehouses in the 14th? Those are the unique Parisian experiences we don't want to let slip away. My name is Jennifer Geraghty, and I'm the host of Don't Miss This. From art installations to authors' talks to tours to culinary ateliers and everything in between, each week, Don't Miss This will fill you in on the best of what's going on in Paris. Don't Miss This airs every Sunday on Paris Underground Radio. If you think you've got something we should know about, please email us at hello@parisundergroundradio.com. Happy exploring!
Great, and then the trailer for Navigating the French.
To flan is far more than to wander, and bonjour means way more than hello. Discover these and more words that teach us what makes the French so French with Navigating the French, Sundays on Paris Underground Radio.
And last but not least, Paris Cachée.
While walking the streets of Paris, do curious details ever catch your eye? The city has a myriad of lieux cachés, or hidden places, and we uncover the most intriguing ones on the Paris Cachée podcast. If you're keen to explore Paris on a deeper level, then join Paris Cachée host Lily Heise and a cast of zany historical figures from queens to angry mobs as we traverse the city and the centuries on our quest to discover the surprising stories behind these lieux cachés. The Paris Cachée podcast is available every other Sunday on Paris Underground Radio. Visit parisundergroundradio.com/Paris Cachée to listen and subscribe.
Okay.
Wow, that was really great. Can I jump in here on the Q&A and get this started?
Please do.
Well, welcome everybody. It's really exciting to be here. Even though we're not doing it in person, it's so exciting to see all of you participating with this live launch party. And to kick it off, our first Q&A is, as was described, cultural and events. And we already had some questions from some of the great participants. And so I'd like to start off straight away with some of those questions. We have Susan Jones, who asked us, what is your favorite hidden pastime in Paris? Something that might be quiet or loud, but that those who don't live in Paris wouldn't know. Who would like to answer this question?
I feel like that's a question for Lily.
Oh, yeah, sure. I actually have a lot of ideas, but when thinking about this particular idea, I thought that going to art openings in Paris was something that locals know, and not even all locals, actually. And a lot of art openings happen in the art galleries on Thursdays, sometimes on other days of the week, but there are actually a few websites that list them. And you can go to art openings and learn about art, see culture, mingle with locals, and get free wine. And so it's actually quite a cheap outing as well. So for me, I think that that's quite a local thing, that it's not too talked about outside. It's our little secret.
Well, I think that's a great idea. And you know me, I love free wine. Well, yeah. Oh, I only have water. What am I doing? We've got a second question, actually. Well, it's not really a question, but let's see who would like to help Tony. Tony Palafax, she is visiting Paris on the 17th. What's the one thing she should not miss? Who would like to
jump in on that one? This is actually, I think, one of the early episodes from Understanding the French, and that is to flâne. So flâner is a French verb that means to wander, but it means a lot more than that, which is something that I get into with one of the experts that I interview on my podcast. But basically the idea of to flâner is something that it's sort of an aimless wandering. You can't have a destination. You can't be trying to get your step count up. You have to just be wandering and people watching. And I think that Paris is a city that is very easy to visit on foot. You have the river running through it. You can walk from the southernmost point to the northernmost point in 3 hours if you're motivated. And as you do all of that walking, you're going to see a lot of the city. You're going to see the neighborhoods evolve and change. You're going to see some of those hidden cachet spots that Lily talks about in her podcast. So I think that no matter how long you're here, take some time to just wander and see what you discover. I think that's a pretty essential Paris activity.
Absolutely.
Piggyback on that, the one thing that I would tell you to do, like there are so many monuments and things to see and lists of sites, but I think that the number one thing you should do is to flâne, and then make sure you just go to a cafe, any cafe that strikes your fancy, sit down, have a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and just people watch. I think so much of what happens in Paris happens like when you're sitting at a cafe, like you're watching a film in front of you, people passing by, you get a real sense of what it's like to live here. So yeah, flâne and then sit and drink some wine. That's what I would say.
I did that today, actually, and I live here. We have a live question. What is the question, Caroline? I don't see it.
It's in Q&A, and it is from Jody. She asks, what is the most embarrassing thing expats say or do, but have no idea that the French are laughing at them?
Oh my God, there are so many that I discovered much later, and to my utter mortification. But actually, I swear I'm not doing this on purpose, because obviously it was a live question, but I do actually address one of my most mortifying moments on the first episode of the podcast. And actually, my guest is here attending, Julie Barlow, who wrote the book on the word bonjour, which means hello. The French say hello all the time. If you want to know why, tune in on Sunday. But the French say bonjour all the time. And so whenever you start a new interaction with a new person in any given day, you say bonjour. To give you an idea, my most mortifying moment was realizing about 7 months into working in a very small company with only 30 employees that I had offended everybody, because like a diligent little American hard worker I walked in and sat down at my desk and started working in the morning. And I had offended everybody, and everybody thought that I was awful. So say bonjour to people. Say it all the time. If you think you're saying it too much, it's probably just the right amount.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And to add on to that, the other thing is not only say bonjour, but when you walk into a place, you know, the politesse here, you have to go into a place and say bonjour, say au revoir, say s'il vous plaît, merci. We've got another question here too. It's, what books would you recommend that gives advice on Paris? I know a lot have come out recently, but not sure what to buy first. And this is from Dawn. Books on Paris. I think I know one personally. Lily, do you know one personally that we might suggest?
Yeah, but it's about advice though. So I wrote a book that came out last year about short stories on Paris during the pandemic, and it's a really great look into how Paris is right now and how Paris has been evolving. It's not just about the pandemic, how Paris has been evolving these last few years. But if you want a book about advice, There are a couple. There's a good book called 60 Million Frenchmen Can't Be Wrong. And I think it's been a while. It maybe came out 10 years ago or something like that. But that one does go over quite a lot of these kind of, faux pas, or why the French do certain things that we might fall into these cultural differences and traps. And so for an actual book, I'll put it in the chat. I do think that book is a good place to start anyway, and I'm sure that a lot of their information and tips are still valid today. And then if someone else has another idea, I've got a different one I can pop into. I can pop a few into the chat too for you.
Thank you, Lily. Well, while Lily's popping those into the chat, I think there's a question that people didn't really, Emily answered it a little bit, but what's the biggest way to really absorb French culture when you're just passing through?
I think it is what Emily said before. I think the thing about Paris is that it has a real feeling, it has a real way to it. And I think if you spend all your time hopping from tour to tour or landmark to landmark, you're going to see a lot of really beautiful, incredible things, but you won't really get a sense of what it feels like to live here. And it feels really nice to live here, if I may say so. So I think that the best thing you can do is wander around and get lost. You can't really get lost in Paris. All the streets are windy, but there are metro stations everywhere. So I would say, start walking, something strikes your eye, follow it, just walk around seeing what you like, stop and have a glass of wine. I think that's the best way to get a sense of what it really feels like to live here. Like I said, I've been here almost 11 years. I still do that all the time.
And I would add to that what Jennifer originally suggested of sitting in a cafe is another really good way to soak up Paris, because if you think about the cafe through French history, the reason cafes became so important has a lot to do with how tiny the living spaces are. People used to congregate in cafes, and the French Revolution was planned in a cafe. A lot of our literary movements came to be in cafes. A lot of the philosophy that has sort of been born in France came out of cafes. So, you have a couple of cafes that are kind of fixed in the collective Parisian memory. Le Fleur and Les Deux Magots are two that come to mind, but it doesn't have to be those ones. You can go to literally any cafe, and what's really awesome in France is you can sit with one cup of coffee for a very, very, very long time. No one's going to bother you. No one's going to just drop the bill. No one's going to try and turn your table over. So you can sit, you can people watch, you can chat with your waiter, you can chat with people next to you. You can tell people next to you don't want to talk to them, and that's fine too. So that's kind of a place I think that you're going to be at the intersection of a lot of different types of people, a lot of different walks of life. And it's a really good way to sort of rub shoulders with the Parisians, even if you're only here for a very short time.
Very good advice. Well, and here's a question. What is the best way to learn French? I have my own answer for that, but I'm not on the panel. I'll let somebody else answer it.
Well, I think I know what you were going to say, Gail. And well, the best way to learn French is to have a French partner, but that isn't the only way to learn French. I think listening to the radio or watching TV is a great way. And I don't watch TV normally, but in my early days in Paris, and just listening to the radio and having it on, you'll just absorb words without making any effort. And then you'll be like, oh, I know what that means. I sort of do, that sounds familiar, and you might look it up, but it'll stick with you. And so I think that's a great kind of a different sort of tip than studying grammar books. But I think that that's a way I made big improvements in my earlier days.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think going around and hearing if you are in Paris, if you can come here, immersing yourself as much as possible. When I first got here, I would just ride on the metro and listen to the people speaking around me. And I think just once you start to hear the cadence, you start to get a sense of the language, certain words will start to come to you and it'll fit together a little bit easier. also, I think when you learn French from a book or a course, oftentimes it's academic French and it's not really the way that people speak. And that can make a big, big difference.
Well, I think like time for one more question.
I
this
don't
one's
think we have time for one more. Well, really quickly.
I wanted to know how people can find out how they can get their event featured on Don't Miss This.
Oh, well, that's a great question.
Yes, see?
If you want to have an event, if you know of something cool that's happening up or you're happening soon, or you're hosting something, send an email to hello@parisundergroundradio.com with subject line "Don't Miss This," and we'll see about getting it on the air. Great question, Gail. Thank you so much. All right, so thank you so much for this. If you've been so intrigued by what you've heard on this panel, the hosts have put together some different auction prizes for you. So you can find a Business in France mastermind. You can get your business promoted in a banner on the Paris Underground website and a guest spot on the podcast of your choosing offered by me. You can get a curated selection of cheese with tasting notes delivered to you by Emily. Or you can get a copy of Lily's book that she mentioned, There's Only One Paris, Tales from Our Times, as well as an introduction to the history of Paris, the ultimate guide to romantic Paris, and 5 custom design date ideas, all from Lily. Yay! So here are the links for all of that in case you're interested.